What's the optimum height of a truly sustainable building, if there is one, and what factors influence this calculation when you try to calculate how tall a building should be versus its sustainability?
I'm actually not sure if there's an ideal height for a building, because I think what we're really discussing is an issue of density. How many people will inhabit a certain amount of space? So height may simply be the result of that, but not necessarily. And I think to investigate models of density is much more what we should look into and not purely discuss issues of height. I think very often we come into a situation that seems to be quite predefined, where a certain height is set, a certain bulk of GFA is set that is supposed to be put in there, and where in a way frameworks seem to be quite rigid that we enter, especially the more and more you work in inner urban situations, the more defined these things are. And what we typically try to do is really question if these assumptions are necessarily the best for either the project or the city, or ideally both. And I think that there were a number of projects where we kind of studied the zoning laws and found ways to maneuver them to actually unlock a dual potential, both for example, in certain cases, building a taller building to free up more space on the ground and actually give public space back to the city, or in other ways to densify and actually not exceed the height but be far below the height limit, because we found that building an interlaced and integrated structure was a far more better option in this case.
Can you think of a good example of some assumptions you challenged and how you
addressed
that?
One very good example of addressing kind of the issue of height by not building tall was the Interlace. It was a project where we were asked to build about 1,000 residential units with a 24-story height limit. So the logical conclusion would have been to say we build about 12 towers, 24 floors, and a little city of vertically and isolated towers. And we looked at this very carefully, and I was very interested in how we could build a much stronger sense of community rather than disconnected buildings, to think of a more networked structure that would express space as a communal issue and space as an inhabitable issue for the people that lived there. So in some ways we turned the vertical into the horizontal, put them on the side and stacked those horizontal bars up. Now the peak of this whole heap, if you like, this hill that it forms, is still 24 floors, but the entirety is actually a completely horizontal system that is no longer vertical.
How do you incorporate these horizontal aspects of the traditional cityscape into tall buildings? Because we all accept that density should increase, but do we have to give up the benefits of horizontal city life? And I guess the Interlace is a good example of how you've adapted that. Are there other ways in which you've addressed that question?
Yeah, I think the Interlace is one extreme prototype, if you like, for how to turn the vertical into the horizontal. But there are obviously other directions to go. We are working currently on a project where we're trying to achieve a somewhat similar effect while working with an even denser and therefore necessarily more vertical typology, also in a residential context. These projects are all, in a way, really pursuing a quest to not define the multiplication of space as the primary issue and the provision of residential GFA, but really of a sense of communal space and inhabitable space beyond the individual units. So how can we actually create a community, a place, and in that sense, a truly urban place? Because the city is about sharing. The city is not about individuality per se, but it's about how individuals come together and the spaces they share, and in a way the adventure of that space. I think there is a lot of, the great word of the conference, what we've heard a lot is vertical cities. And I believe it's a great ambition, and it's probably an exciting and a correct idea. I think also we are quite far away from true vertical cities. I think so far things are quite limited to maybe sky gardens, maybe sky lobbies, maybe certain moments that start to move beyond the monolithic enclosure that the generic tower used to have. But I think at the same time we are still far away from really reaching the density and energy that a city would truly have in its verticality. It's in a way part of my work and the buildings that I'm currently developing to exactly investigate what key steps we should take to in a way break buildings open to to the space and reality of human occupation, of human usage, and of human presence in those structures. A building that I'm currently doing in Bangkok, MahaNakhon, the tower there, was really an exploration of how we could open up the mute shaft of the large tower. So a big piece in the city that in a way is so abstract that it doesn't speak anymore of the people that are in it. You have no sense of the people that inhabit the building. So I started to erode the volume and the shaft of the tower and reveal a kind of small-scale pixelated human grain, if you like, of inhabitation. And these are all spaces that are indeed for inhabitation, for usage. So it will be the activity of the people that suddenly defines the image of the building and the city. And these are all models that I'm trying to investigate of how we can reconnect both physically, actually, and on the basis of how a building speaks to you or speaks to the city, of how that can work.